More than 63% of American retirees are permanently collecting smaller Social Security checks right now, and most of them made that choice without fully understanding what it would cost them. We are not talking about small amounts. We are talking about decisions that can quietly drain six figures from your retirement income over a lifetime. And the most painful part is that almost nobody explains this clearly before you sign the paperwork. Today that changes. In the next 20 minutes, you are going to see exactly why so many retirees claim Social Security at 62, what it actually costs them in real numbers, and what the research says about who should wait and who genuinely should not. This is not about scaring you into one choice. This is about making sure you understand what you are actually deciding before you make it. Let us start with the number that tells you everything. In December of 2023, 63% of all retired worker Social Security beneficiaries in America were receiving permanently reduced monthly benefits. That is 32 million people collecting less every single month for the rest of their lives. 66% of women and 60% of men. And the reason that number is so high comes down to one date. The day someone turns 62. Age 62 is the earliest you can claim Social Security retirement benefits in the United States. It is not the best age for most people. It is simply the first age allowed. And that single fact, that you can do something, has turned into a financial trigger for tens of millions of Americans who may never fully recover from pulling it too soon. Here is what the SSA data actually shows in black and white. If your full retirement age is 67, which applies to everyone born in 1960 or later, and your full benefit would be $2,000 a month, claiming at 62 drops that to $1,400. Every single month. For the rest of your life. But if you wait until age 70, that same benefit becomes $2,480 per month. That is an $1,100 monthly difference between your worst possible claiming age and your best. Live to age 90, and the math becomes brutal. Claiming at 62 versus 70 in that scenario produces a lifetime gap of roughly $124,000 before cost of living adjustments, before taxes. And those cost of living adjustments actually make the gap larger over time, not smaller, because every annual raise is a percentage of your base benefit, and a smaller base means smaller raises every year for the rest of your life. So the first question worth asking is obvious. If delaying pays so much more, why do so many people claim early? There are real reasons. There are psychological reasons. And there are some myths that have quietly become accepted wisdom without any evidence behind them. Let us go through each one honestly. The single most common reason people give for claiming early is straightforward. They stopped working. In a large national survey published through the National Bureau of Economic Research, 38% of early claimers said the primary reason was simply that they had already retired, and Social Security seemed like the natural next step. That logic makes sense in the moment. You stopped earning a paycheck, so you turn on your benefit. But retirement and Social Security claiming do not have to happen on the same day. Almost a quarter of people in that same survey waited at least 2 years after retiring before they claimed, and they used pensions, savings, or a spouse's income to bridge the gap. 62% of those who delayed used an employer pension to fund those in-between years. So the retirement to claiming connection is a habit, not a rule. The second big reason people claim early is financial pressure. 21% of early claimers in that survey said they needed the money. And for lower income households, this is genuinely real and genuinely painful. Research from the Schwartz Center for Economic Policy Analysis found that low-income workers aged 63 with earnings at or below $37,500 were more than 3 times as likely to have already claimed Social Security compared to workers earning above $70,000. When your savings are thin and your bills are real, waiting 5 or 8 years to collect more feels impossible. That is not irrational. That is survival. But here is the uncomfortable truth this channel has to name honestly. Many people who believe they cannot afford to wait actually can. The Ember-EA research showed that 72% of retirement-age Americans claimed Social Security before full retirement age, even though 64% of them had non-retirement financial assets equal to at least 2 years of average Social Security benefits. 54% had 4 or more years of assets sitting there. And among people who claimed early, 1 in 3 had IRA assets worth at least 2 years of average benefits, money they were not spending. In fact, 57% of that sample claimed Social Security before they ever made a single IRA withdrawal. They turned on the smaller, permanent government benefit first, while leaving the flexible, tax-advantaged private savings untouched. That ordering is not always wrong, but it is often the opposite of what the math supports. The third reason is health, and this one deserves real respect. 14% of early claimers in the NBER survey cited poor health as a reason, and the mortality data backs them up. People who claimed before age 65 had an 8.2% death rate between ages 66 and 71, compared to 4.6% for those who claimed after 65. Worse health is a legitimate reason to consider earlier claiming. If you have serious medical concerns, a shorter expected lifespan changes the break-even math significantly, and nobody should pretend otherwise. The break-even for claiming at 62 versus waiting until 67 is roughly 78 to 79 years old. The break-even for claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 is roughly 80 to 81 years old. If your health history or family longevity makes reaching those ages genuinely unlikely, early claiming may be the right call for you personally. But here is what the same research also found. Even after controlling for health differences, early claimers still tended to underestimate the financial cost of their decision. And the mortality gap, while real, was generally not large enough to erase the average lifetime gain from delaying. Most people who claim early because of health concerns are making a reasonable emotional choice, not necessarily the most financially optimal one. The fourth reason is one of the most underappreciated forces in the entire claiming debate, and it has nothing to do with money or health. It is social norms. When researchers asked people who claimed right around full retirement age why they chose that timing, 45.7% said it simply seemed natural. Not that they did the math. Not that a financial advisor told them to. The phrase full retirement age carries the word full in it, and that word signals to millions of Americans that this is the appropriate, correct, finished moment to begin. But here is what the SSA itself confirms. Full retirement age is not the age that maximizes your monthly income. It is only the age at which you receive 100% of your calculated benefit. Benefits continue rising past full retirement age, all the way to age 70, at 8% per year. Claiming at full retirement age when you could delay to 70 means leaving up to 24% more monthly income permanently on the table. The label is accurate but misleading, and it shapes the decisions of tens of millions of Americans every single year. The fifth reason is the one that sounds rational but often is not: fear that Social Security will run out before you collect enough. 15% of early claimers in the NBER survey cited this concern. And to be fair to them, the headlines about Social Security's finances are genuinely alarming if you only read the top line. But here's what the official projections actually say. The 2026 Social Security Trustees Report projects that the combined trust funds will be depleted around 2034. That sounds catastrophic. But depletion does not mean zero. After depletion, the system would still be collecting payroll taxes from working Americans, and the 2026 trustees projected that 83% of scheduled benefits would still be payable even after the funds run dry. The 2025 report projected 81%. These are not comfortable numbers, and reform is clearly needed. But claiming at 62 to beat a system that will still be paying the large majority of benefits if nothing changes is a strategy built on a misreading of the actual numbers. The fear is understandable. The math behind it does not hold up the way many people believe. Now let us talk about what most people get wrong when they think about the break-even calculation, because this is where a lot of confident-sounding advice quietly falls apart. The standard break-even framing goes like this. If you claim at 62, you get more checks, but each one is smaller. If you wait until 70, you get fewer checks, but each one is much bigger. So you need to live long enough for the bigger checks to make up for the ones you missed. That framing is technically correct, but it leaves out three things that change the answer significantly for most households. The first is survivor benefits. If you are married, or were married for at least 10 years, your claiming decision does not just affect you. It affects the person who may outlive you for 10, 15, or 20 years. Here is how this works. When you pass away, your surviving spouse is generally entitled to the higher of their own benefit or your benefit. If you claimed early and locked in a smaller amount, that smaller amount may become the permanent survivor benefit your spouse lives on after you are gone. The SSA data for 2023 showed that 33% of Social Security's 8.1 million widow and widower beneficiaries had lower benefits because of the widow's limit provision, a rule that often punishes families when the deceased spouse claimed retirement benefits early. And the SSA's own Office of Inspector General found in 2026 that 5,367 widow and widower survivors could have received a projected $113.8 million more if their spouses had simply delayed claiming to age 70. A 2026 TIA Institute study put numbers to the protection that delay creates for surviving spouses. For women whose husbands had claimed at full retirement age, widowhood raised the probability of falling below a severe income threshold by 6.9 percentage points. But each additional year the husband delayed claiming cut that negative effect by about 12%. The most protection came in the first 4 years after widowhood, often the most financially vulnerable period. So the question for married couples is not just when do I need the money. The question is also who in this household is statistically more likely to outlive the other, and what benefit will they be living on after I am gone? For most couples, the answer is that the higher earner should delay to 70 if at all possible. That higher benefit almost always becomes the survivor benefit, and it will compound with inflation adjustments every year for as long as the surviving spouse lives. The second thing the basic break-even misses is inflation compounding. Social Security is indexed to inflation through annual cost of living adjustments. That is one of its most powerful features, and one of the least discussed reasons why delay has more value than the break-even numbers suggest. Fidelity's analysis is precise on this point. Cost of living adjustments are percentage increases applied to your existing benefit base. If your base is $1,400 instead of $2,480, every single inflation adjustment is calculated on a smaller number. Over 20 or 25 years of retirement, that compounding gap becomes significant. A 1% COLA on $1,400 is $14. A 1% COLA on $2,480 is nearly $25. Multiply that gap over years of retirement and across the cumulative size of your benefit base, and early claiming quietly costs you more each year through smaller inflation protection on top of the lower base amount. The third thing most break-even calculations miss is taxes. And this one can cut in multiple directions depending on your situation. Federal income tax on Social Security begins when your combined income crosses certain thresholds: $25,000 for single filers, $32,000 for married couples filing jointly. Above those thresholds, up to 50% of your benefit can be taxable. Once provisional income exceeds $34,000 for singles or $44,000 for joint filers, up to 85% of your benefit can be taxed. Here is the complication. If you delay Social Security and bridge the gap by drawing down an IRA or 401k in those years, those withdrawals count as taxable income. Done thoughtfully, strategic withdrawals before you claim, including Roth conversions, can actually lower your lifetime tax burden because you are taking money out when Social Security is not yet adding to your provisional income. But if you claim early and layer Social Security on top of RMDs from retirement accounts later, you may push more of your Social Security benefit into taxable territory. There is also something called IRMA, the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, which is how Medicare charges higher income retirees more for Part B and Part D coverage. In 2025, single filers with income above $106,000 and married filers above $212,000 can pay Medicare Part B premiums of $259, $370, $480, $591, or even $628 per month, compared to the standard $185 premium. IRMA is based on your tax return from 2 years earlier. So Roth conversions, large IRA withdrawals, or capital gains events today can affect your Medicare costs years down the road. These interactions between Social Security timing, tax strategy, and Medicare costs do not have one universal right answer, but they absolutely must be understood before you choose a claiming age. Now let us address something that is rarely discussed clearly when people talk about why not to claim early, and it involves a specific group of people who face unique risks: divorced spouses, surviving spouses, and spouses in couples with very different earnings histories. If you were married for at least 10 years and are now divorced, you may be entitled to claim on your ex-spouse's record up to 50% of their benefit at full retirement age, as long as you are at least 62, currently unmarried, and the divorce has been final for at least 2 years if your ex has not yet filed. That benefit does not grow after your own full retirement age. So if your ex-spouse had a significantly higher earning record, delaying your divorced spouse claim past your own full retirement age gains you nothing in most cases. But claiming it too early, before your own full retirement age, permanently reduces it. If you are a widow or widower, the rules give you something most married couples cannot do. Because deemed filing, which normally forces you to claim your own benefit and any spousal benefit simultaneously, does not apply to survivor benefits, you can use a sequencing strategy. You can take survivor benefits first and switch to your own retirement benefit later at a higher amount. Or you can take your own benefit first and switch to the survivor benefit later if it becomes larger. Getting this sequencing right can be the difference between maximizing your lifetime income and permanently locking in a lower amount. And survivor benefits can begin as early as age 60, but at only 71.5% of the deceased spouse's benefit. At survivor full retirement age, the survivor benefit rises to 100%. That gap, up to 28.5%, is permanent if the surviving spouse claims too early. There is a row price example that illustrates the stakes in this area very clearly. Imagine a couple where the higher earner has a full retirement age benefit of $24,000 per year. If that higher earner claims at 62, the reduced benefit hits a widow's limit cap, meaning the surviving spouse's benefit is capped at 82.5% of the higher earner's full retirement age benefit, or about $19,800 per year. But if the higher earner delays to full retirement age or later, the surviving spouse can receive 100% of the higher benefit. That is a meaningful, permanent difference in income for a widow or widower who may live another 15 to 25 years. Now let us talk about working while collecting, because this is one of the most misunderstood areas in the entire Social Security system. If you claim Social Security before full retirement age and you are still earning income from work, the earnings test applies. In 2025, the exempt amount is $23,400. Above that limit, $1 of benefits is withheld for every $2 you earn over the threshold. In the year you reach full retirement age, the exempt amount rises to $62,160, with $1 withheld for every $3 above the limit, but only for months before your FRA birthday. After full retirement age, there is no earnings test at all. Here is the part many people do not know. Benefits withheld under the earnings test are not lost. At full retirement age, SSA permanently increases your monthly benefit to credit those withheld months. So if the earnings test reduces your benefits in the short term, you eventually get that money back in the form of a higher permanent benefit. But there is a genuine confusion problem here. NBER research found that some workers bunch their earnings just below the earnings test threshold because they misunderstand the rule, believing it applies to all their earnings once crossed, not just the dollars above the limit. That misperception causes some people to leave money on the table by working and earning less than they otherwise would. The earnings test is not a trap, but only if you understand how it actually works. And that brings us to the knowledge problem that sits underneath almost everything we have discussed today. Most Americans simply do not know the Social Security rules well enough to make optimal decisions. An SSA survey in 2019 found that only 20.6% of respondents correctly knew that benefits are based on the highest 35 years of earnings. 63.9% knew benefits are inflation adjusted, and 63.2% understood that widow and widower benefits are available. In that same NBER survey, more than 50% of respondents knew that claiming later raises annual benefits, but said that fact did not change their decision. Only 13% said they were genuinely unaware that waiting pays more. So the problem is not mostly ignorance. It is that people know delay pays more and choose to claim early anyway. That is a behavioral gap, not an information gap. And it is driven by things like present bias, loss aversion, and the anchoring power of a phrase like full retirement age. Loss aversion in particular plays a measurable role. SSA summarized research found that people with high loss aversion scores reported expected claiming ages about 6 months younger than people with low loss aversion scores. They were mentally framing the 8% per year gain from delay as a risk. What if I die before break even? Rather than as a guaranteed compounding return on a decision they are still alive to benefit from. One more piece of data worth understanding before we pull everything together. The benefits of delaying Social Security are not equal across all income levels, and it is important to be honest about that. Congressional Research Service data show that among men at age 50, the life expectancy gap between the top and bottom income quintiles widened from 5.1 years for the 1930 birth cohort to 12.7 years for the 1960 cohort. For women, it widened from 3.9 to 13.6 years. Data from economist Raj Chetty and colleagues show a life expectancy gap between the top and bottom 1% of earners of 14.6 years for men and 10.1 years for women. The current actuarial adjustments built into Social Security were designed assuming average life expectancy. Higher earners who live longer benefit disproportionately from delay. Lower earners with shorter life expectancy break even later, or may not break even at all. This does not make the delay strategy wrong, but it does mean the right claiming age for a 62-year-old former physical laborer in poor health with limited savings may be genuinely different from the right age for a healthy 62-year-old professional with a pension and an IRA. No single answer fits every life. What does fit every life is understanding the decision fully before you make it. So let us bring this down to the clearest possible summary of what you now know. Claiming at 62 locks in a permanent 30% reduction from your full retirement age benefit for everyone born in 1960 or later. Waiting until 70 locks in a 24% increase above full retirement age, meaning the gap between 62 and 70 is 44% in monthly income. 63% of retirees are already collecting reduced benefits, with women more likely than men to have claimed early. The most common reason is retiring and treating Social Security as the automatic next step, not careful financial analysis. Break-even for waiting until 70 is roughly age 80 to 81, which is below average remaining life expectancy at 65 for both men and women in the United States. For married couples, the higher earner's claiming decision can determine the surviving spouse's income for 15 or 20 years after the first spouse dies. Fear of Social Security running out is based on a misunderstanding. Official projections show 83% of benefits still payable even after trust fund depletion. Working before full retirement age while collecting does not permanently lose withheld benefits. They are credited back at FRA. Tax and Medicare IRA interactions with Social Security timing are real and should be modeled before claiming. And for divorced spouses, widows, and widowers, sequencing strategies still exist that most people never learn about. Here is what the research from Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, and T. Rowe Price all converges on. For the average American with average health, average savings, and a partner who may outlive them, delaying Social Security past 62, and ideally to 70 for the higher earner, increases lifetime retirement income significantly. Not always. Not for everyone. But for most people who have the means to wait. And the biggest obstacle is not the money. The biggest obstacle is the story people tell themselves. That full retirement age means full income, that claiming early is safer, that Social Security might disappear, or that the break-even math makes waiting pointless. None of those stories hold up against the data. The decision you make about when to claim Social Security is one of the largest financial decisions of your retirement. It sets the income floor you will live on for the rest of your life. And for a surviving spouse, it may set their floor as well. You deserve to make that decision with the actual numbers in front of you, not the myths, not the fear, not the social pressure of an age that just sounds right. Now, if you want to understand exactly how Medicare costs, IRA withdrawals, and Roth conversions should factor into this decision, and how to build a bridge strategy that lets you delay Social Security without running out of money in the meantime, that video is already waiting for you. Watch it next. Because the timing of your Social Security claim is only one piece of the puzzle, and the piece most people are missing is how all the other parts connect to it.